11 Haunting Corner Store Tales. Discover the sinister secrets that will leave you spine-chilled. Beth could feel it in her bones, the weight of despair hanging in the air like a foul fog. As a single mother living in a crumbling suburb that used to pulse with laughter and camaraderie, she had known struggle. But tonight it was different. The corner store she had taken a late shift at felt alive, as if it were a beast waiting for its next meal. Shadows darted between the aisles, coiling like snakes, whispering secrets that scratched at her sanity. Who could believe a mundane little store could hide such dark wonders? At midnight the clock ticked like a countdown to an execution. The bell above the door chimed, echoing with a clang that sent icy shivers rattling down her spine. She was alone, so she thought, her heart racing against the oppressive silence. With each creak of the floor, she glanced around, half expecting to see hollow eyes staring back. A chill snaked around her, tightening her throat, and she took a deep breath, trying to shake off the growing dread. "Just my imagination," she muttered, but the flickering lights overhead seemed to mock her, sputtering as if fueled by otherworldly energy. Shadows shifted just out of her line of sight. Could they be watching? Panic bubbled beneath her skin. She recalled that old man at the counter, the store owner, with his unsettling grin. The spirits of this land must be appeased, he had whispered to her, voice low and threaded with ancient secrets. Beth shuddered. Could that really be true? Or was it the ramblings of a crazed man? Before we continue, I need to tell you something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to their system and many people are missing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and select all notifications so you don't miss future videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. Gripping the register, she squinted into the murky aisles, tension mounting like a balloon ready to burst. The silence rippled with sinister anticipation. And then she remembered Mrs. Lawson, the sweet old lady who piled her cart with canned goods, always bartering with a shaky smile. She'd been in just last week, but tonight? There was no sign of her. With growing anxiety, Beth's mind darted back to hushed conversations among neighbors. They say those who walk in after midnight don't always walk out. She could feel that truth creeping like ice water into her veins. The bell chimed again, louder this time, accompanied by a gust of cold, whispering voices swirling around her. The store hummed with energy, its pulse synchronized with the anxious rhythm of her heart. Suddenly, the lights around her stabilized, and she saw a figure in the shadows, a familiar one. Mrs. Lawson? No, it was a trick of the light. But more unnerving was the expression she had worn, eyes wide and betrayed, mouth agape in a silent scream. Beth stumbled backward as the air thickened, wrapping tightly around her like a noose. The faint sound of laughter echoed, a melody dipped in madness. You can't protect them, Beth. It taunted, phantoms of her neighbors swirling in the darkness. She felt the walls closing in, the truth knotted in her stomach. Her community was tied not just by geography, but by the desperation that had drawn them into this dark vortex. She wanted to run, to scream. But where would she go? The familiar faces of her friends had morphed into masks, terrifyingly alien in the dim light. Beth's pulse thundered in her ears. With each shadow that stretched toward her, she understood. The strangest horror lay not in the store, but in the hearts of those she thought she knew, lured by secrets that threatened to ensnare them all. As the lights blinked violently, creating a strobe effect, she felt that something unspeakable was going to happen. Would she be the next one to vanish, swallowed by the very shadows that once felt like home? In that moment, with dread clawing at her throat, Beth realized she had to face the nightmare before it consumed everything she loved. The store trembled as if answering her silent plea, shelves vibrating along with the intensity of Beth's fear. The shadows danced closer, swirling like a storm around her. She felt their cold breaths at her neck, every whispered word sending her heart into a dizzying spin. She could hear Mrs. Lawson's voice, barely a murmur now, but thick with horror. Help me. It wasn't just a plea, it was a forewarning. The air thickened with a foul stench, the scent of decay mingling with the faint trace of something sweet and sickly. Beth felt the bile rise in her throat. The lights flickered violently once more, revealing glimpses of twisted faces emerging from the darkness, neighbors she once shared coffee with, friends she confided in. Now they looked unrecognizable, their features warped in anguish, eyes sunken in pleading, yet filled with malice. As if pulled by an invisible force, Beth stumbled forward, drawn to an aisle heavy with shadows. Her fingers brushed against a shelf lined with dusty bottles. Each one whispered their own story of sorrow and regret, like echoes from a forgotten past. She recognized one. It had belonged to Mr. Dunn, a man who had spoken of ghosts haunting his childhood. Their warnings had fallen on deaf ears until now. Beth! The voice came again, clearer this time, a haunting mimicry of Mrs. Lawson. You must leave! They're waiting. Suddenly, the lights burst into a brilliant white. In that blinding moment, Beth saw it, a figure, shapeless yet defined, looming at the back of the store. It pulsed like a heart, throbbing with an energy that threatened to swallow her whole. Her instincts screamed at her to run. But where? Each exit loomed like a black hole, promising nothing but despair. The clock sounded off again, each tick a countdown to her doom. Panic clawed at her voice, and she spun around, searching for something, anything, to protect herself. Without thinking, she grabbed the nearest object, a glass bottle, grimy and cracked. Stay back! She shouted, though her voice trembled. The figure didn't waver, it inched closer, tendrils of darkness reaching out like hands. Beth, you have to understand. The darkness twisted into a voice that resonated deep within her, one that felt like it was drawn from her very soul. You've been chosen. Those words chilled her more than the grasping shadows. Chosen? For what? The question gnawed at her. As the shadows tightened their grip, twisting her world into a vortex of confusion and fear, she remembered a final childhood story, the tale of how the corner store was a boundary, a place where the lost would come to seek solace but find nothing but despair instead. Then, with one desperate act, she hurled the glass bottle at the swirling mass. It shattered with a satisfying crash, scattering shards of glass across the floor like fallen stars. For a moment, silence cloaked the store, thick and suffocating. Then, screams erupted. The shadows recoiled like they had been burned. The faces twisted into screams of rage, the familiar masks morphing back into twisted, grotesque forms. They surged toward her, desperate to reclaim their hold. Help us! They wailed, voices dripping with despair. We want to let you leave. It was then she realized the truth. The spirits of the store weren't seeking revenge. They were frantic for liberation, their souls ensnared in a loop of despair. Beth's heart raced. Could she break this cycle? Was she strong enough to confront the twisted reality of her neighbor's shared agony without succumbing to it herself? The shadows surged forward again, and as their icy tendrils grazed her skin, she steeled her resolve. She had to uncover the secret of the store. She had to finish this. But how could she help spirits that were bound by their own darkness? As their whispers grew louder, echoing the names of the lost and the broken, the lights flickered again. The weight of 1,000 forgotten stories pressed down on her, and she realized she was at the center of it all, chosen to decide their fate. Time is running out, Beth, the shadows hissed. You must choose. The clock rang loudly as it struck 1. What decision would she make? What hidden truths would she unearth that would bind or release her and the tormented souls trapped within these walls? And more chillingly, would she still want to face them if she discovered the horrifying reality? The shadows pressed tighter, a living curtain swirling menacingly around Beth. The desolation in their whispered cries seeped into her bones, each wail tinged with hopelessness that gnawed at her sanity. Her breath quickened as she spun, searching for a sign, a hint at a way out, but every direction blended into a vortex of darkness. Help us! The spirits implored, their voices echoing like a funeral dirge. You can't escape. She took a step back, her options narrowing. What could she possibly do to reconcile the anguish of the damned? Each face that floated in the darkness flickered memories of happier times, playdates, bake sales, Sunday picnics. Now, they molded into grotesque caricatures of her once familiar neighbors, and this torment was her own doing. "We're still here," Beth's voice creaked, older than any she recognized. It belonged to Mrs. Sullivan, the sweet old lady who used to give Beth cookies when she passed by. "We need you. You can set us free." "Set you free?" Beth's voice faltered. "You don't even look like yourselves. What happened to you?" The old woman's face twisted, a momentary flicker of vulnerability flashing across her features before being smothered by rage. "We were taken. Trapped between worlds because of your indifference, and now we pay." Suddenly, the light flickered once more and the store reverberated as if acknowledging her pain. The air turned icy, making her stomach drop. The clock's chime had slowed as if mocking her attempt to resist. Time wasn't just escaping, it was warping. "Beth!" Mrs. Lawson's ghostly visage materialized, eyes wide with fear. "Time is a construct here. Your choices will seal our fate. Break the store's curse or succumb to the shadows." Beth's heart thudded heavily in her chest. She had felt the story unfolding long before she stepped inside, but now the colorless remnants of nostalgia became a tempest of dread. "Tell me how. I can't do this alone," she shouted, desperation pooling in her throat. "Find the source." The voices chorused, a cacophony of tortured souls. "That which binds us, a pact we made, a promise broken. The light will show you." The darkened figure pulsed again, seeming to draw strength from their fear. Needles of panic shot through Beth. Should she stand and confront this monstrosity or search for the elusive light they mentioned? Before she could decide, a blinding light flashed through the store, illuminating the endless rows of products cloaked in shadow. Suddenly, she caught a glimpse of a shimmering object atop the counter, different from anything else, glowing faintly like a lighthouse in a storm. It was her only chance. With every ounce of courage, she dashed towards it, weaving through the labyrinth of shadows that writhed beneath her feet. Grasping the object, it felt warm, a beckoning pulse in the cold gloom. In that split second, the shadows surged, a wave of dark desperation. "No! Don't take it! You'll regret it!" they shrieked, their voices a blend of anger and despair, their sharp fingers grasping at her. She hesitated, holding the object. Was it hope or a curse? "Beth!" A familiar voice broke through the chaos. "You must decide, quickly!" The darkness drew closer, threatening to envelop her whole. The clock continued to tick, each sound a heavy reminder that time was slipping away. What if she failed? What if she let them drown in darkness, just as they had kept her at bay? Beth tightened her grip on the glowing object. She would make her choice. But as the shadows writhed around her, one question lingered at the edge of her consciousness. What unspeakable truth did the light illuminate, and would it be her salvation or her doom? The sensation of malice roared around her. Time hung in the balance, quivering with terror. Could she truly face what lay ahead if she unveiled the storied past of the corner store? And then the whispers crescendoed, the store trembled, the moment hung like a pendulum on a string, swaying between the known and the unknown. Where would the light lead her next? The light flickered with an otherworldly glow, illuminating Beth's trembling hands as she gripped the object, a small glass orb pulsating with energy. It felt alive, warm and vibrant, like a heartbeat against the chill of her surroundings. But what it contained remained hidden, obscured by the shadows swirling hungrily around her. "Don't listen to them, Beth!" shouted Mrs. Sullivan, her voice cutting through the agony around them. "They'll twist your heart into darkness. You must break the pact." Pact? Beth's mind raced, a thousand horrific possibilities crowding in. Her memories of the store flashed, snippets of laughter and community drowned by the cacophony of despair echoing through the air. How could she have known that the lives she once cherished were woven into something far more sinister? The shadows surged towards her, desperate fingers curling like claws reaching for prey, their whispers now frantic. "The light belongs to us. It is a part of the curse." Heart pounding, Beth turned her focus to the orb, every moment feeling like a clock ticking down to an inevitable doom. The store pulsed with energy. She could almost see something, faces twisted in anger, echoes of laughter now turned to screams. Yet, beneath it all, lay an undeniable pattern, a web spun by their shared lives, their interconnected pain. To confront it, to understand it, was her path to salvation. Whatever happens, do not fear the truth, the old woman urged, her spectral frame flickering like a candle, revealing just a hint of the warmth Beth had always known. Beth steadied her breath, inhaling sharply as resolve hardened within her. She raised the orb to eye level, peering into its depths, searching for answers. In an instant, images cascaded before her, countless faces of the lost, memories bursting forth like fireworks, illuminating the darkest corners of her heart. Suddenly, a single memory pierced through all the noise, the day the store changed ownership, when the promise of new beginnings turned to ash. "Is this why you're trapped?" she barely managed to utter, the recognition clawing at her throat. Did we take too much? Were we blind to the need around us?" The shadows quivered, their gnarled forms convulsing at her words. "You're too late. It can't be undone. We were promised peace, but you forgot us." Panic tightened around Beth's chest. The light felt heavy now, as if it wanted to share its burden, its weight pressing down with the knowledge of what must come next. Yet the orb thrummed with the potential that could alter everything, could weave the lives here back into the fabric of time. She took a breath. "If I break the curse, will you be free? Will I have to let go of my past?" The shadows hesitated, and for a fleeting second, the air grew still. "You must choose love over fear. Sacrifice all you thought you knew. Only then will we know peace." Being surrounded by the weight of anger, terror, and hope made her stomach twist in knots. A cold sweat broke along her forehead, but she had to choose: find the way to redeem them or watch them spiral into oblivion. Overwhelmed, she pressed the orb closer to her heart and whispered a promise, unsure if it was meant for the spirits or herself. A crack began to form in the darkness, a fractal shimmer escaping her grasp. But just as she felt the shift, a low growl erupted from the shadows, a primal scream of resistance. "No! You will fail! You do not understand the cost." Beth's heart raced. As the darkness threatened to engulf her, she clenched her eyes shut, bracing for the uncharted territory ahead. She couldn't turn back now. The edges of her reality spun, blurring the lines between hope and despair. The moment hung in suspension, teetering between light and shadow, truth and illusion. What price would she have to pay to untangle this nightmare? And as the shadows roared and the light twisted within her grasp, one thought echoed in her mind: was redemption even possible, or would she become another lost soul, forever wandering the depths of the store's curse? The growl pulsed through the air, a sound primal and full of rage. Beth felt its vibrations in her bones, her body tense as if the darkness itself sought to consume her whole. She could feel the orb's warmth contrasting against the rising chill, an anchor in the storm of fear. Suddenly a surge of imagery struck her, uninvited and merciless. She saw Mrs. Sullivan's face, aged by worry, yet filled with fierce determination as she whispered incantations against the wall of darkness. The old woman reached toward Beth, her fingers brushing against a figure that loomed in the shadows just behind her. "Don't give in! Fight it!" Mrs. Sullivan cried, her voice fragmenting under the weight of despair. The flicker of the store's lights echoed her urgency, casting elongated shadows as if they were alive. The orb pulsed stronger, fiercely, urging her to remember every moment shared, every laugh exchanged. But along with that warmth came images far darker: betrayal, greed, and the day the store had changed. It was a piercing shame that sliced through her as guilt wrapped around her heart in icy tendrils. "Sacrifice," she whispered to herself, testing the word on her tongue as she finally faced what lay within her. What did she need to release? What had she unknowingly taken from the lost souls swirling around her? The shadows writhed closer, and Beth's sense of urgency ignited a blinding terror. "What do I have to give?" she screamed, a desperate plea sent spiraling into the dark, mixing with the anguished moans. The shadows danced, their laughter sinister against the echoing walls. "You must let go of your past, your hopes, your dreams." One shadow slithered near, its deep voice reverberating like a drum. It paused, as if listening to her heart falter. "That is the price." Beth staggered back, breath hitching in her throat. You mean, all of it? Everything? Yes. They shrieked, a cacophony of raspy voices melding into one. It is the only way. The shadows shifted, revealing monstrous faces twisted in emotional agony, former patrons who had sacrificed themselves for the store's success yet remained trapped in eternal damnation. The realization carved deeper into her soul: the store had flourished at their expense. Each willing sacrifice had created this darkness, and now it radiated through her. She was left holding the key to their prison. Please, she thought of her family, of her dreams and aspirations. The orb throbbed steadily against her chest, sensing her turmoil. In that moment, Beth finally understood their stories had not only merged but had become a part of her, entwined with every hope she had. Torn apart by indecision, she held the orb and closed her eyes against the tears. A part of her wanted to lash out, blame the shadows for their torment, but it wasn't just them. It was her too. The store must pay for their freedom. They deserve it, she murmured, feeling the weight of the orb grow heavier. But what about me? As her heart drummed in uneven rhythm, the shadows lunged, their fingers grasping her as they chanted louder, "You must choose. Your past or ours? Choose." Beth's mind raced, images of her past flooding in like wave after wave, pulling her under. She had lived her life by their rules, but these shadows were demanding more than she was ready to give. With a final surge from the orb, the room vibrated violently. Beth gasped as a rush of energy coursed through her, flinging her backward. She smashed against the shelf, sending objects crashing to the ground. Desperation coursed through her veins. "I wouldn't let you take me," she yelled, gripping the orb tighter as the glow intensified, illuminating the corners of the store that had long been bathed in darkness. But as she opened her eyes, she realized the shadows were beginning to retreat. Had she found her strength? A thin veil of hope unfurled within her, then tightened as she faced the darkness once more. They will know peace at what price? Silence reigned, the chaos subsided. A frozen tension lingered. Right then, she understood the true cost. The orb pulsed, demanding an answer. What part of her heart was she willing to pay to unshackle the past? All eyes were now on Beth. She knew a choice lay before her, a terrifying decision that would tip the scales forever. Would she indulge her spirit's longing for freedom or converge into shadow forever? And at that moment the answer slipped from her grasp, lost among the swirling chaos that surrounded her. What would she choose? What would she turn into? The winds howled, and with a mighty surge, the shadows lunged again. The shadows surged forward like a tide driven by an unseen force, clamoring to envelope her. The chill in the air morphed into an almost tangible cold, wrapping around Beth like a suffocating shroud. Time twisted, every heartbeat echoed, thudding louder than the chaos. No! Stop! Beth pressed the orb to her chest, its warmth radiating fiercely and momentarily pushing back against the encroaching darkness. She felt a pang of desperation and anger. The faces within the shadows twisted and melded together, each one a grotesque emblem of sacrifice and despair that begged for her attention. They wanted her to join them in the void, but she wasn't finished fighting. "Release us! Release yourself!" they wailed, an eerie harmony of sorrow that made the walls tremble. A chill crept down her spine. How did these tortured souls know her so intimately? Did they taste her fears, her doubts? Bracing herself, she focused on the orb, its radiant light flickering in rhythm with her pulse. "I can't do this!" she gasped, feeling the weight of generations of heartache pressing in. "What do I do?" The shadows paused, recoiling slightly, as if her words had rung truthfully. In a heartbeat, they reorganized themselves into a swirling vortex, intertwining visions and whispers disorienting her. She saw Mrs. Sullivan's frail body, standing resolute against the tide of darkness. "Don't let them drown you, Beth!" With newfound clarity, she steadied her breath and drove her focus deeper into the orb. She could sense an ancient power pulsating from it, a power that could either imprison or liberate. "I will not be your sacrifice," she declared, her voice burning with raw determination. For a fragile moment, the shadows hesitated, doubt skittering across their faces. Just then, she felt the orb grow warmer at her command. It responded to her defiance, emitting a bright flash, scattering the darkness momentarily. A sliver of light radiated out, revealing fleeting glimpses of the store's past, laughter, the clinking of bottles, and whispered secrets caught in the aisles. Then, the shadows roared in fierce anger, reforming and thrashing wildly. "You think you can escape your fate?" they snarled, their voices growing shriller, like nails on a chalkboard. "You are one of us, you always have been." Beth clutched the orb tighter, imagining it tearing free from the darkness wrapping around her heart. "I am not!" she cried, though doubt wrapped around her like a noose. An anguished scream surged from the depths of the swirling mass, vibrating through her very core. "You will never break free! We will take you with us!" Suddenly, the ground beneath her trembled, fissures cracking open, exposing the dark abyss below. The shadowy figures started pulling at her, their grasp like ice, threatening to drag her into their bottomless pit of sorrow. She could almost hear their mournful cries, blending into a single terrible chorus that begged her to surrender. "No!" Beth shouted, feeling the power of the orb surge again. In a heart-stopping instant, the light erupted dramatically, bathing the storage room in blinding brilliance. The wave crashed against the oncoming darkness, urging her one last push. "Let them go, or be lost forever!" The orb screamed into the void, vibrations echoing all around. And at that moment, as her will collided with dark necessity, she realized what she truly had to do. But before she could decide, the shadows shrieked, drowning out her thoughts. The ground quaked violently, and with one final act of defiance, she was thrown into the air. Time stretched, the orb slipping from her fingers, the walls closing in. As she plunged into the depths, a single question echoed in the darkness: could she reclaim her future, or would she fall into the despair of those lost? The shadows lashed out, grasping at her, beckoning her home to darkness. Beth plummeted, and the sensation twisted like a knife in her stomach. Light blurred around her, tearing at her vision, as the darkness reached for her with hungry fingers. The cacophony of wailing grew deafening, threatening to claw at her sanity. "Fight it!" Mrs. Sullivan's voice, strong, urgent, pierced through the chaos, anchoring Beth in that endless freefall. Desperation surged within her. She remembered the warmth of the orb, its promise of illumination, of hope. Yet it was gone now, slipping through her grasp like dreams upon waking. With sheer will, Beth concentrated on the memory of its glow. She visualized that warmth spreading through her veins, igniting her heart. Light collided with shadow, a struggle that sent shivers coiling along her spine. The shadows twisted their form, turning into figures she recognized, all faces marked with sorrow, pleading. "Leave us," they hissed in unison, the weight of their despair making her chest feel tight. "Join us in eternal rest." But Beth knew surrender would bring only doom. She clenched her fists, willing herself to regain control. As if sensing her defiance, the shadows reached out, and the cold wrapped around her neck like a noose. "Release or suffer forever," they cried, and the ground was no longer an abyss, but a grotesque landscape of twisted limbs and sunken eyes, a hell built from the sacrifices of those who had come before her. "Get off me!" she screamed, trying to wrench herself free from their grasp. Pain shot through her as fingers gripped her thighs, pulling her toward a veil of darkness that throbbed with a life of its own. The air was thick with anguish, almost solid, pressing against her like a vice. Then, a thought pierced the despair, a memory of hope, of laughter, of the day she found the orb. With a fierce determination, she roared, "I am not yours!" Suddenly, her feet hit the ground, the impact jolting her senses. The shadows recoiled, surprised by her defiance. Gritting her teeth, she forced her hands back towards the space where the orb had been, willing it to return. Nothing happened. Around her, the shadows seethed, furious and hungry. "You think you've escaped?" they shrieked. "You belong to us. You cannot fight your lineage." Tension coiled in her stomach. Her heart raced. What lineage? What were they implying? But she shook her head, rejecting their words. This wasn't about legacy, it was about life. Her life. Raising her arms, Beth called forth that inner light again. She felt warmth swell in her palms, igniting with every breath. "I will set you free," she declared, her voice rising as a beacon against the darkness. The shadows rippled, crashing against her declaration like waves against the shore. Their forms began to flicker, their masks of grief faltering. "Release us or be lost forever," they screamed in a horrifying chorus. A blinding flash emitted from her hands, enveloping her in brilliance. The shadows shrieked louder, the cacophony twisting her insides. The light expanded, pushing back against the tide of darkness, and for a moment she felt powerful. But as quickly as it came, the illumination began to fade. She could feel the shadows pulling once more, their icy grips seeping into her skin, tugging her towards the edge of despair. "Please! Help!" she cried, but the walls closed in, echoing her plea with mockery. At that moment, she realized the truth. Her only chance lay in the orb. It wasn't just a tool, it was a part of her, a conduit for the strength she needed. With urgency, she spurred herself forward, driven by an unyielding desire for escape. Suddenly, the orb reappeared, its glow pulsating stronger. "Now!" it commanded, and Beth seized it, feeling the power radiate through her. "Let them go!" she bellowed, and the shadows recoiled, a collective gasp vibrating through the air. The abyss trembled, the war between light and dark raging wildly. She was almost free, but a shadow flung itself at her, darting with lethal speed. What choice lay before her now? Would she abandon those lost souls, or would she risk everything to sever their ties forever? Beth stood on the precipice, heart racing, as she prepared for the fight of her life. Would she plunge into darkness or rise into the light? The answer hung in the air, pulsing like the orb in her hand, waiting for her command. Beth stood poised, heart thundering, the orb trembling in her grasp. The shadows writhed before her, restless specters, each pulse of dark energy pressing against her resolve. The choice loomed like an ominous storm cloud: draw them back into the light, or relinquish her own salvation. "Make your decision!" The shadows screeched, their faces morphing into grotesque masks of pain and rage. Beth's skin prickled with a mix of fear and defiance. Their desperate eyes bore into her, echoing centuries of sorrow and betrayal. Yet beneath their anguish, she sensed something deeper, a longing for release. Would they drag her into oblivion, or could she save them? "No!" she shouted, shaking her head defiantly. "I won't let this be my fate." The orb flared brightly, illuminating the grotesque landscape around her. It enhanced her desperation into conviction, her heart swelling as she channeled her power. Nobody deserved eternal misery, not even these wretched souls bound within the darkness. "Let them go!" she cried out, her voice steady, resolute. The light from the orb burst forth, flinging tendrils of luminescence like a lifeline into the suffocating black. And then it happened. The shadows recoiled, invisible hands clasping nearest faces as their wails harmonized into a piercing scream. The brightness engulfed their forms, breaking the chilling grip on her soul. Freedom, like a sweet whisper, swept around her. "See? You don't want this." Beth pressed on, feeding off the arcane energy, determined to shatter the cycle of despair. "Join the light." One specter faltered, its anguished visage softening. "Please, we are lost." That moment caught Beth. Fear met empathy and twisted into a sharp pain. "No! You can be free! All of you!" The luminous surge intensified, the shadows began to fragment, bits of darkness falling away like ash. Yet another shadow lunged towards her, a whirlwind of ferocity, gripping her throat with a vice-like force. "You'll pay for this!" It rasped, its breath a chilling darkness against her skin. Fingers clawed into her flesh, dragging her towards the depths where pain thrived. Gasping, Beth tightened her grip on the orb, channeling her will into the swirling light. It pulsed harder, driving out the dark. "Let go!" she commanded, desperation fueling her words, and the orb responded, blinding light so dazzling it nearly blinded her, but she didn't falter. With everything she had, she unleashed a burst of radiant energy, throwing it outward like a beacon in the night. The shadows screamed again, their forms tearing apart in the onslaught, devoured by the light they so desperately rejected. And then silence. The darkness peeled back, unveiling a stark reality that felt foreign yet achingly familiar, a world where shadows concaved under the sun. Around her, the remnants of despair dissipated, leaving faint echoes of anguish. But relief turned to confusion as the ground beneath her quaked, and the orb flickered, an unstable pulse threatening collapse. A rift opened, swirling chaos beyond comprehension, and from its depths arose a new presence, a figure cloaked in shadows, watching, waiting. "I warned you," it whispered, voice like a smothered flame. "You cannot escape your lineage, you cannot deny its call." Beth's breath hitched, dread pooling in her stomach. The figure took a step forward, the essence of all despair surrounding it. Fear crashed over her, a tide threatening to drown out the light. "What do you want from me?" Beth cried, clenching the orb so tightly her knuckles whitened. "Everything," it answered, a cruel smile emerging in the darkness. "You will embrace your legacy, or you will perish." The shadows stirred, and the rift widened, sucking the air from her lungs. Stranded on a precipice between light and utter darkness, Beth fought to grasp the glimmer of hope that still existed. Had she truly won, or had she merely set the stage for a conflict far greater than she could imagine? In that moment, uncertainty clawed at her soul, begging the question, was this the end of the battle or just the beginning of a much darker journey? The ground trembled beneath Beth's feet, the vibrations coiling upwards like a snake ready to strike. The figure in shadows loomed closer, its eyes glinting with an unsettling light that pierced through the thick fog of despair swirling around her. Each flicker of that unnatural brightness sent jolts of fear racing through her veins. "Embrace your legacy," it said again, tauntingly slow, as if to savor her dread. A rush of memories cascaded through her mind, memories of whispers in the dark, tales of a family tied to shadows far older and crueler than she could grasp. Her ancestors had danced on the edge of darkness, now it was her turn. "No!" Beth shouted, her voice cutting through the thick, oppressive air. "You don't understand. I want nothing to do with this." But the figure merely chuckled, a sound that resonated like cracking glass. "You think you can defy what you are? You think light can save you?" The rift expanded, a gaping maw drawing her closer, as if it wanted to consume her whole. The orb in her hand flickered wildly, the energy within it waning. Waves of dread washed over her, and with every second, the weight of inevitability pressed down. This was a curse passed through generations, and she could feel it kissing her skin like the cold touch of death. Desperation clawed at her throat. She couldn't let the shadows win, she wouldn't join them in their chasm of despair. Taking a deep breath, she summoned the last vestiges of her power, focusing on the light that had warmed her heart even after shattering the darkness just moments before. "Get back!" she screamed, thrusting the orb forward. A brilliant flash erupted, casting dazzling light into the interdimensional chaos that surrounded her. The silhouette screeched, melting under its intensity, but the cloaked figure stood firm, an immovable object against her radiant blast. "You're merely postponing," it hissed, its voice echoing through the rift. "You cannot outshine darkness." The light began to flicker, dimming under the weight of its malice. The vortex clawed at Beth, hunger palpable in the air as if it could devour her spirit. Panic gripped her. She had to fight, yet her strength began to fade, like a candle inching toward its extinguished wick. "Remember who you are, Beth," a faint voice whispered through the tumult. It was a voice she almost recognized, an echo from the past, tethered to her lineage. With newfound determination, she pushed the darkness aside, forcing her memories to surface. The stories her grandmother would tell of the women who faced shadows like monsters, leaping into the light to stand against the tide of despair, using their bloodline like a weapon. They were fighters, and Beth felt that fire ignite within her again. "Whatever you are, you don't own me!" she yelled, and in that moment of clarity, she channeled every ounce of her legacy, merging it with the orb's glowing essence. A radiant pulse erupted from her, a blinding wave crashing against the dark figure. But a chilling laugh answered her. "You are not ready, child." The ground split apart beneath her, a psychic rupture where hope tethered to despair. As everything she cherished slipped away, shards of her past flew around her, revealing her birthright disjointed revelations encased in memory. With one last push, Beth reached deep into her core and unleashed a burst of shimmering energy combined with the weight of her resolve. The shadow figure lunged at her, trying to overpower her, but the forces clashed violently, illuminating the space. Beth felt herself being pulled apart as she anchored the light against the encroaching darkness. "Embrace your fear," it bellowed, breath hot as smoke. "Or succumb." Suddenly she understood. The choice was not between light and dark. It was a call to balance, acceptance. She was both the light and the shadow, but would she weave them together, or would it shatter her completely? And in the zenith of that realization, the light grew so blinding that Beth was swallowed by it. What emerged could either save her or pull her deeper into a world beyond reason, where secrets and terror intertwined. What lay beyond the blinding light? Did she dare to face it? The blinding light enveloped Beth as it swirled around her, warmth flooding her senses like a balm on painful wounds. Instead of terror, she felt a strange calm, a recognition of self that expanded beyond her skin. The blinding brilliance pulsated, a heartbeat reflecting back all that she had endured. "Embrace who you are," echoed in her mind, words of her grandmother, and the resonance of the stories told long ago. As the light receded, she stood in a space unlike any she'd known, a vast expanse where shadows wove into the landscape, not as enemies, but as parts of a whole. Beth felt different. She could sense each thought coursing through her like an electric current, intertwining her lineage with a newfound resolve. The shadowy figure loomed ahead, less threatening now, but with an air of ominous gravity. "You dare to assume power over darkness?" it hissed, shape-shuddering, caught between desperation and rage. "I don't fear you," she replied, her voice steady. "I recognize you and I accept you as part of me." Around her, the shadows whispered, a thousand voices layered into a harmonious blend, terror morphing into solace. They spun around Beth, drawing closer, their anguished cries morphing into a balm of longing and loss, like a chilling breeze that settled into her very bones. The shadows paused, their furious energy faltering, and in that moment Beth grasped the orb tightly. "I will break this cycle. You will no longer haunt me or my community. You will be free." With every word, the orb pulsed in affirmation, a shimmering promise surging through her palms. As if her determination had unlocked something ancient, the shadows began to flicker, revealing glimpses of the souls trapped within, their faces twisted in pain, yet marked by recognition. With each soul she acknowledged, the burden of their sorrow lightened. "No more lies!" she shouted into the depths. "No more fear! Accept your past, so you can be free." Her voice rang out like a bell, resonating with truth. A sudden blast of light erupted from the orb, overwhelming in its brightness. The shadows cried out, the cacophony mingling in an odd symphony of fear and hope. Surrounded by their terror, Beth felt herself sway, but she pushed through, unwavering. "I release you!" she cried, the light surging forth like a tidal wave, enveloping the shadows completely. "Let the light guide you," she whispered, feeling a warm rush sweep over her as she closed her eyes, surrendering her fear and shame. Suddenly, the chaotic darkness around her transformed into a whispered concert of liberation, a symphony of pain released, lives reclaimed as the light enveloped the specters in its embrace. One by one, the shadows flickered. For the first time, they began to shimmer with essence, breaking apart as they flew toward the infinite horizon, ethereal tendrils of darkness melting into the dawn. "Thank you?" they echoed softly, relieved, departing the chains of anguish that had bound them. When silence fell, Beth opened her eyes, blinking as the brightness receded. She stood alone in the once sinister corner store, now glimmering with warmth. The shelves no longer seemed haunted, instead exuding a sense of peace, a place where sorrow had unfurled its wings to fly free. The clock chimed softly, the hands settling as if finally at rest. She took a deep breath, breathing in the tangible lightness filling the air. It felt as if a burden had lifted, leaving her infused with a powerful sense of purpose. "Mom?" A small, hesitant voice broke through the stillness. Startled, Beth turned to find her son, Sam, peering cautiously around an aisle. Sam! She exclaimed, rush of relief rushing through her. She crouched down, relief flooding her as she opened her arms, inviting him into her embrace. Holding him tight, she felt all the shadows of the past fade away, the bonds of fear unraveling. I thought you got lost in the store, he said, voice trembling slightly. I did in a way, she whispered. But I found my way back. We'll always find a way back. In that moment, Beth felt smaller fears dissolve as if they too had been liberated, shadows now transformed into lessons learned, weighted lessons turned to light. Together, they stepped outside, the doors swinging shut behind them. A gentle breeze caressed her cheek, filled with the promise of new beginnings and reclaimed connections. Looking back at the corner store, the laughter and warmth of memories swirled around as distant echoes. Mom, can I have a soda? Sam's innocent question pulled her from her thoughts. Of course, she grinned, holding his hand tightly, ready to walk forward into a world where shadows danced only in the light of hope. As they disappeared into the sunset, the whispers of the past gave way to promises of tomorrow. The cycle had been broken, and a new story was just beginning, one filled with laughter, love, and the freedom to embrace the light. You need to subscribe now. You don't want to miss out on the next exclusive tales that will keep you on the edge of your seat. Smash that like button now to feed the algorithm. It really helps me reach more awesome fans like you. And flood the comments section with your reactions and theories about this electrifying ending. I can't wait to hear what you think. Don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. True fans support the channel through these actions.